Hey guys, how's it going? Tool Cruise here, and today we're going to be talking about power meters. So I'm often asked on the channel what power meter I use, and for the last year I've been using the Favero Assioma power meter pedals. So they've actually recently made some updates to this model. They have some firmware updates and also some changes to the body itself. We're going to be talking about those in today's video. And for anyone who doesn't know, Favero is actually an electronics company based out of Italy. They've been making power meters now for a couple years now, and they're actually known as some of the most accurate and most affordable power markets out on the market. These actually start at about $400 if you go with the Uno option. I'm going with the Duo option, so that means there's power meters on both sides, but you actually don't need both sides. Even with just the one side, you get like 99% of the accuracy. The main advantage of having both is you know any power discrepancies between your left and right legs. So there are some advantages to having the Duo, but for most general people, I think the Uno would be more than enough. It starts at about $400, and these pedals are about 150 grams. They work with look style cleats. And for anyone who's never really used power meters before, there's a couple different options you can go with. Some of the more popular options are wheel-based options or crank-based options or pedal-based options. Me personally, I really like the pedal-based options because that allows me to switch it from bike to bike. So I can use this on my bike outside. I can use this on my spin bike inside. I can switch between my road bike and maybe my gravel bike. They're really easy to use and you can switch between bikes. So that's a really big plus for me. These are also, of course, compatible with Ant Plus and Bluetooth, so it will work with pretty much any device. I've used these with my Garmin computer. I've used this with my Wahoo computer. You can actually use these to work on a spin bike and connect to Zwift. Anyway, let's open up the box and see what we got inside. Ta-da! So a nice, really fresh display here, right out of the box. And in here we've got our usual paperwork, our manuals and stuff like that. We'll take a look at that later. It's not going to be the focus of today. We've got included our cleats. So like I mentioned before, these are the look style cleats. It also comes with this really massive hex wrench, which is one of my favorite hex wrenches for changing pedals now. Really solid build. That's a nice plus. And they also have a whole bunch of different adapters. So whether you're based in Europe, America, Japan, or wherever, they have most of the adapters here, so you should have one that works for you. And these are the cables for plugging in the pedals themselves. So they have an internal battery, they charge, and the charge lasts really long. So I've been using these pedals for over a year now, the set that I had before. I found that one charge would last almost a full month. It depended on how much I rode. If I rode a lot, maybe it would be 3 weeks, but if I rode pretty sparingly on that bike, because I switched from bikes, it easily lasted a whole month for me. And last but not least, we have our washers. So you might need these depending on if your cranks have a little groove inside there or not. The reason for that is because with these power meters, the power meter itself is not in the cleat body itself. So these cleat bodies are actually replaceable. You can get these for pretty cheap as a replacement part. I think only about $50 or $60. But the power meter itself is inside this piece here. So you don't want this to have any contact with the crank itself. You want to have at least, I believe, 1 millimeter space between the crank arm itself and this piece here. This is where all the sensitive stuff in the gyroscope is, which reads all the data. So you don't want that touching the crank arm itself. You want to have that spacer in between there if you need it, in case your crank arm has a little bit of a groove in there. The other main difference with this new cleat body is you'll see there's a bit of a wider range here for the float option. So in case you want to have a bit more float with your pedals, you now have that option with these newer version of the pedals. And I also want to talk about some of the other unique and interesting features of this power meter. So again, let's take a look at this section here, which is where the actual power meter is stored. You see these two little dots? This is actually where the charger connects via magnet, so you know how to line that up. The other interesting thing about these power meters is they're super accurate. They use a system called IAV, which stands for Instant Angular Velocity Based Power, meaning that it's able to calculate the exact velocity at any point during the pedal rotation, whereas most other solutions out there just use kind of the average, and by just calculating with the average, it doesn't get the whole scope of the data. So that's one reason why these are more accurate than some of the other power meters out there on the market. They've got a whole section on their website and document explaining all this a little bit better than I can, so I'll link to that down below in case you're interested. Some of the other interesting things about this, though, is it is completely sealed and waterproof, so you don't have to worry about riding it in rough conditions. I've ridden these in the rain countless times and I've had no problems. And also with these being sealed, it doesn't limit you just to riding in the rain. They have a temperature range of about -10 degrees Celsius to 60 degrees Celsius. So whether you're riding in super cold conditions or riding in a crazy hot desert or riding indoors or whatever, they should be able to work no problem. In case you're interested in seeing the full install process for these pedals, go check out my video from last year where I go over the entire process. But basically, these are connected by Bluetooth. You can download the Favero app on your phone, and there's just a few more steps to go, and then you're basically ready to go. The same thing is true with all the firmware updates, so if there's ever any firmware updates on the pedals, so if you have an older version of the pedals, you can open up the app and you can see the firmware updates there, so you can update to the latest and improved technology. So that's the cool thing about these pedals as well, is you don't always need a hardware upgrade, but things can be updated in the firmware itself, and that seems to be something that Favero Favero is doing with the recent updates to the firmware. Anyway, I'm going to get these bad boys charged up and ready to go on our first test ride, so be sure to stay tuned for the next ride. I'm going to be connecting these up to my indoor bike, and we're going to be doing some more Zwift videos upcoming soon. So stay tuned for our upcoming videos, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't yet already. Also, if there's any other questions you have about these pedals, leave them down below and I'll try and get to them as soon as I can. Anyway, thanks for watching guys, and we'll see you next time.